Daughter reached out after 8 years of silence only to ask for inheritance from her grandma. Now she's furious I won't share it. I, 54 male, got divorced from my wife, 48 female, 8 years ago, and my daughter, 28 female, cut all contact with me and chose her mother's side without even asking me how I felt. Even though my divorce was nearly a decade ago, it has taken a lot of time for me to accept how things turned out to be and make peace with my life. This has been partly because my ex-wife tried to completely destroy my reputation, but mostly because I really loved my daughter, and being completely shut out from her life was harder than anything. As she was an adult at the time, there was no way for me to be in her life unless she wanted me to be, and she seemed sure of her decision to pick her mother over me. I don't have any family of my own except my mom who had Alzheimer's, so the whole ordeal was definitely one of the worst things that has ever happened to me. I tried to contact my daughter several times after the divorce, but she was dead set on being on her mom's side and didn't even try to hear my side of the story. At one point my ex reached out to me and sued me for harassment if I didn't leave my daughter alone. That spelled things out for me and I stopped contacting her. I've spent the last 8 years taking care of my mom and focusing on my career. I've had a few casual relationships here and there, but I feel like I can't fully trust another person after my divorce. Anyway, that has been my life for nearly a decade. Sorry if I seem like a downer. The reason I'm writing this post is because my daughter recently reached out to me after all this time. I was over the moon and thought that she had finally come to her senses and understood that the divorce was not just my fault. It was also comforting in particular because my mother recently passed away and I've been dealing with that grief by myself and was craving some comfort and family. So my daughter reached out to me a few months after my mother passed away. I got a call from a number I didn't recognize and I picked up to hear a woman's voice on the other side. I didn't know it was my daughter and didn't even recognize her voice because it had been that long since we spoke, and I was quite shocked when she introduced herself. She said that she saw on Facebook that her grandma passed away and wanted to check up on. I thanked her for calling and said that I was doing all right and told her that I missed her. We talked for a bit and she said that if I want to meet and actually catch up in person instead of the phone, she would like that. I was extremely happy and agreed immediately. We agreed to meet at my house over the weekend. I was really excited about meeting her after all these years, so I am writing this post to share my excitement with anyone who might be reading. I hope we can rebuild our relationship again, or at least get to know each other. My daughter came over to have dinner with me because I wanted to cook for her. I was nervous and excited. When I first opened the door, I absolutely didn't recognize her because it's been nearly a decade since I last saw her and she was just a little girl back then. We started talking, and even though it was a little awkward at first, I think we both opened up after a while. She told me about her life and what she does for work, and I told her about my life. After dinner, we finally acknowledged the elephant in the room. I asked her why she never bothered to listen to my side of the story during the divorce and chose her mom by default. I admitted that her mother was more present as a parent because she was a stay-at-home mom, and back then I worked in construction and worked long hours, but I always tried my best to take out as much time as I possibly could for my daughter. My daughter then said that she regrets how things turned out and that she was too young to think things through and got manipulated by how her mom made things sound. Basically, my ex-wife painted me as the ultimate bad guy who didn't care about anyone except himself, and since she never got to hear my side of the story, she never questioned whatever her mom said. We talked a bit more about this and things were going well until she finally revealed why she was there. We had been talking for hours at that point when I asked her what made her reach out to me after all these years. She looked a little uncomfortable and I told her that she could be honest with me. Well, then she said that she really had been keeping tabs on me through Facebook, and when she found out that her grandmother had died, she thought lawyers would contact her about her inheritance, and when no one did, she thought she should reach out to me personally. She said that she wanted to give me some time and space to grieve, but she had recently gotten engaged and had no contact with her groomer and her daughter, and she changed her city as soon as she turned 18 when Stephanie was 1 year old. She never had any contact with her and never disclosed this part of her past with anyone, according to her. She told Dad, and Dad told me that even her friends from college and work do not know about her daughter because she doesn't consider herself a mother in any dimension of the word. I don't know if this is how she thought to cope, but I guess she felt that since she had no contact with her daughter, and if she stopped mentioning her, maybe she would cease to exist in her mind. Unfortunately, that was not what God had planned for her. 6 months after her wedding to Dad, Stephanie showed up at home. I was the one who opened the door, and one look at her and I realized that I didn't like her. She was reeking of alcohol, and frankly, she looked like a drug addict. She would have been 19 at that point, so I really don't know why she came looking for mommy as an adult. I don't know what happened after that because I was left out of all family discussions regarding her. All I do remember is that she stayed with us for a while, and Dad and I used to have long discussions late into the night for a couple of days. I think 2 weeks after her arrival, she had been living with us for that entire duration. Dad came to my room and said that he wanted to talk to me. He told me that Stephanie would be living with us for a while longer until they could try and do something to get her life on track. I couldn't believe my ears. Even at that age, I knew that girl was a disaster and that she should not be in the house. I told Dad that that was really unfair, but he told me that he could not turn her away, knowing that she is Anne's family and that she needs help. He then told me the entire backstory of Stephanie and Anne. He said that Stephanie's biological father had passed away, and she had no real family left anymore, which is why she had come looking for her mom, and it would be very unfair to her if they turned her back and didn't help her out. I hated to admit it, but I knew he was right. That's the thing about Dad. He is a good man, and even though he didn't sign up for any of this, even if he had been lied to by omission, he would never do the wrong thing. He knew that it was important for him and Anne as adults to be there for Stephanie, and even though this came as a huge shock to him, a bigger shock than it was to me, in all honesty, he did not back down from doing the right thing. And that is how, at the age of 15 years, I got a 19-year-old sister with whom I shared absolutely no affinity. She said that she appreciated my offer, but as the only grandchild, she deserves at least some of the inheritance because it's her grandma's money that she was offered. I told her that I wished I could help her, but my decision was final and there was nothing I could do for her if she wasn't happy with the money I was offering. She went completely red in the face and started getting visibly angry. She told me again to reconsider my decision, but I reiterated that I was going to stick to what seemed right to me. And that's when she showed her true colors and said something that confirmed all my doubts regarding her true intentions. She told me that she should have known that I'll always be the selfish a-hole her mom said I was, and she's glad I'm alone in life. I looked at her with barely concealed disgust. Her words were hurtful, but at that point, I knew what to expect. I just didn't expect her to get that brutally honest that fast, that's all. She started to say something else, but I stopped her before she could speak. I told her that I should have known she was her mother's daughter and that the only reason she would reach out to anyone was to ask for a favor. I also told her that using the fact that I was grieving for my mother to try and manipulate me was disgusting, even for a person like her. She tried to say something at that point, but I just laughed in her face and said that if only she had not blocked me all those years ago, she would have gotten my texts about her grandmother and would have probably gotten most, if not all of the inheritance. That sentence had the effect I wanted. She looked utterly baffled and asked me what I meant. I told her to unblock me on her old number so I could resend her all the texts that could never get delivered. Well, she did. I forwarded all the texts where I begged her to hear me out and even let her know that her grandmother was diagnosed with Alzheimer and I wanted them to meet before she forgot about her only grandchild completely. This was completely true, as at the beginning of her illness my mom did often mention my daughter and ask to see her. I remember how it broke my heart to not be able to fulfill that wish. And now this ungrateful, cruel child had the audacity to ask for inheritance. To my daughter's credit, I will admit that she looked ashamed after reading all of those messages. She apologized to me but said that looking at these messages it was clear that her grandma would want her to have her share of the inheritance and it isn't fair for me to punish her like this. She said that she was young and didn't know any better during the divorce or else she would have. I wanted to believe her when she said all that crap about rebuilding our relationship. I truly did, but at that point, I couldn't. I told her that I would consider giving our relationship another chance, but the inheritance was out of the question. She looked at me with pure hatred and left my house. I didn't try to stop her at all. Since then I've spoken to a few of my friends. Most of them agree that I did the right thing. But one of my closest friends said that since I don't really care about the money, I should just forget about it and let my daughter have at least some of it if it meant having family in my life. I don't agree with this, but ever since he said it I can't get it out of my head. Should I give my daughter part of my inheritance? Update 1, hi there, this post got a lot more responses than I thought it would. Thanks for your advice and opinions, it gave me the perspective I needed. I guess I'll start by answering the most common question, what happened during my divorce? I haven't spoken about it for years, but I guess it can't hurt anymore. So my wife and I were married for 23 years. You'd think after all those years she wouldn't be able to stab me in the back, but she did. I really don't want to get into the details, but I found out that she was cheating on me with multiple men. Apparently, it had been going on for years before I finally found out. When I found out I was completely devastated. I didn't know how to confront her, so I started drinking heavily and sleeping around as well. I nearly destroyed my life. I fought a lot with her and I guess that and the drinking made it really easy for her to manipulate my daughter into taking her side. After nearly a year of living like that and being separated, we finally confronted each other and got divorced. My ex-wife used to be a journalist at the time and is kind of a local celebrity. She used her influence to try to destroy my reputation and was nearly successful. After the divorce, it took me a lot of time to quit drinking and get back to my normal life. As I've said already, my daughter completely abandoning me did not help, to say the least. I'll admit that when I found out about my ex's affairs, I kind of went off the rails and wasn't present as a parent for my daughter. Even during the time I was separated and for a year or so after the divorce, I pretty much always kept to myself and wasn't there for my daughter. But once I stopped drinking and got my life back together, the first thing I did was to reach out to her and apologize. But she refused to listen to me and blocked me everywhere. I thought giving her time would work and she would eventually come around, but here we are 8 years later and our relationship has only gotten worse with time. So am I the a-hole? Did I do something? Now the other big question is about my mom's inheritance. Well, technically, the money belonged to my father. My grandparents were both doctors and had brought property all around the city during their careers. Most of it was rented out and ended up bringing a lot of money. Dad passed away when I was 21 and left everything to Mom. All of it remained in her name during my marriage and for a few years after my divorce while her health was still right. After Mom passed away, I received everything as her sole heir. My wife didn't receive anything in the divorce except alimony till she got remarried a few years ago because my mom owned everything at the time. So the way things stand, my daughter never even got close to owning anything. She knew of course that her grandma was a landlady and owned a couple of Airbnbs, but I never touched any of that money because the money I made from my old construction business was more than enough to live comfortably. I hope I've answered all your questions. Also, my daughter hasn't reached out to me after that night and I don't think she will, to be honest. I think she made it pretty clear that she only put up this whole show for the inheritance, and now that it's out of question, I don't expect to see her around anymore. I'd be lying if I said I am not at all upset about it, but at this point, I know not to expect too much out of people. No matter who they are. So that's that, I guess. Thanks to all of you for sending support. I appreciate it. I also think it's maybe time for me to put myself out there and maybe get back into dating and find companionship instead of expecting ghosts from my past to come around. Update 2. It's been quite a week, guys. I thought that would be my last and only update, but I guess life had other plans. Anyway, I had just gotten back from work and was considering going out with a couple of buddies when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone but opened the door and there she was. My worst nightmare. She has changed her hair and lost some weight, so it took me a couple of seconds to recognize her, but it's hard to forget someone you were together with for days. In a couple of minutes, I had had enough, and I told all of them that I wanted them to leave, and that they could not come into my house and disrespect me when I was the one hosting them. I then turned to Steph and told her that I had not invited her, and even if her mother had lied to her, she should have had the common sense to understand that it possibly could not have been me who was extending an invitation or an olive branch, because we never liked each other, and we hadn't spoken to each other in over 15 years. To my utter amazement, she started crying, saying that I was just jealous of her fertility because I could never have kids of my own. I hate to admit it, but that one statement stung more than anything I have ever heard before. Thankfully, I kept my cool. I then told her that I was glad I had made something of myself and worked hard to create a name so that my only achievement was not shitting out kids the minute I could get pregnant. I don't think anyone had expected me to say something so vicious, and before I could say anything, and slapped me in front of everyone. She slapped me so hard that my head hurt. I don't exactly remember what happened in the next 2 minutes, but all I know is that by the time I had centered myself, everyone was out of the house, and Keith was sitting beside me apologizing for letting things escalate so much. I told him it wasn't his fault, but the entire situation has taken a huge toll on me. Dad has reached out to me, and so have Aunt Rosa, Uncle Mike, and Noel, but I haven't responded to anyone other than Noel. I am just not in the right headspace to talk to anyone right now. It's not just that they shed all over my party and achievements. They rubbed me the wrong way by poking fun at and mocking my biggest vulnerability and then proceeded to assault me in my own home. And I know Dad is not to blame for this because he could not have anticipated or controlled it, but I am still disappointed that he didn't do anything to defend me in front of everyone when Steph tried to make the day all about herself. Heck, it was Noel, who is still a kid by the way, who had the guts to stand up to her and call her out publicly. I am too shaken by whatever has happened, and I don't think I will be talking to anyone in the family as of now. I just hope and pray that this chapter closes now and that I don't have to deal with Anne or Stephanie again. Update, you guys were right, and I should have known better. This is so not over. I had never outright hated Anne and Steph, but I just didn't like them. What they have resorted to now, however, conveniently puts them in the category of crazy, lying psychopaths who need to be kept away from humanity for its betterment. I have never met a worse duo of lying scums, and God knows why Anne has become blind to the antics of her daughter. She used to be sane, but now it seems like Steph controls her with the twiddle of her thumb. It's a sorry state of affairs for Anne, and I feel bad for her. She has lost all her individuality for a child who does not care two hoots about her. A week after the party, I had still not replied to anyone, so I had no idea what was going on. Ann and Stephanie came to my house. Keith opened the door and did not even invite them in. Steph started screaming at the door, saying that she wanted to talk to me and that I had ruined her life completely. I heard the screaming and rushed to the door, where Stephanie was crying, and Ann said that I had committed the most unpardonable sin and that they needed me to pay for it. I told them they were out of their minds if they thought that I would entertain them for even a second after they slapped me in my own home. And told me that I had to pay for my sins and that they knew I had spiked Stephanie's food, which had caused her to miscarry. I could not help but laugh at the bizarre accusation. I told them that Stephanie had come unannounced and uninvited, and I had zero idea that she was expecting. How could I have magically procured a substance, spiked her food, and caused her to miscarry when I had no idea that she would be coming, and that too, pregnant? They just said that they knew it was me, and there was no other way that something like this could have happened, and guys, I lost my shit. And kept on saying that I had to pay for my sins and whatnot, and Keith asked her what she meant by pay. And she meant literal payment. She wanted me to give money to her useless child who was probably faking an abortion, and maybe even the entire pregnancy. I was furious and tired at the same time. I told them that I had enough money and that I would pay them whatever sum they wanted if they could prove that I was the one who caused the abortion. I told them to have a look at the CCTV footage and see for themselves. That was when they knew that their bluff was called, and they started squirming in their shoes. And the thing is, I am a lawyer. I know when a person is lying. That's literally my entire job. I knew they had been caught and that there was no miscarriage. There probably was no baby either. I then told them that they needed to go with me to the hospital right now and confirm the abortion, or I would press charges against both of them, on Ann for assault and trespassing, and on Stephanie for trespassing and harassment. Guys, you should have seen the way they tried to flee. Keith and I ran after them, and we took them to the hospital. Both of them were in tears by the time we reached and were begging us not to go ahead with it. And had the audacity to say that I was tormenting her poor daughter more after what I had done. I told her to shut her trap because her poor daughter was a grown-ass woman of 36, and she needed to stop playing the victim every chance she got. The tests took some time, but at the end of it, I knew what the result would be. Stephanie was not pregnant, and she had been faking it the entire time. I don't know whether I felt rage or smug. I just knew that I wanted both of them out of sight, that very minute. I thought I would need to down an entire bottle of wine to deal with all that had happened. When we sat in the car, Keith told me to send a text and the reports to everyone, detailing what had actually happened. He said that it was time to expose them completely and cut them off for good. I have done just that, and I feel so much relief. I know now that they won't have the guts to get in touch with me again. I think I'm going to go no contact with Dad, too. I just feel that he is somehow responsible for inviting all this mess into my life, and even if he isn't at fault, I don't want to deal with him right now. I have faced assault and harassment, and an achievement of mine has been ground to dust because of the antics of his wife and her daughter. I can't help but feel mad at him. He was the one who allowed Stephanie inside my house. He could have asked me whether I had actually invited her or not. He could have cross-checked, but it was easier for him to feign convenience, and that just hurts me a lot. I know I am not going to tolerate any more of their drama, and if they try to as much as knock at my door again, I will just get a restraining order against them. I don't care if I burn every single bridge with the family, but I just don't have it in me to deal with this anymore. Update 2. For all those who are hoping for a dramatic update, I have some news for you. Dad has filed for divorce from Ann. After he got to know what the mother-daughter had done, he was furious and threw Ann out of the house. I had a very long talk with him, and both of us got very emotional. In the fight with Ann, she revealed that she had known all along that Stephanie wasn't pregnant, but she already had 5 kids, none of the baby daddies stay. Yes, all of them are different, but Dad thinks they pay child support, and she could not hold a job for long. And thought that if they tried this drama, they could try and get money out of me, which would help Steph out. She told Dad that both of them had resorted to this only because I had chosen to sever ties, and they knew that if they asked like family, I would not have helped Stephanie out. Well, of course, I wouldn't have helped her out. Her brood is not my responsibility. This is why they had hatched this elaborate plan to basically extort money from me. And justified herself by saying that since I could never have kids, and had had a promotion, all the extra money could actually go to someone in need. Dad told her that this was my hard-earned money, and I could even wipe my shit with it if I wanted, and I didn't owe anyone anything. They had a huge fight, wherein kept defending Stephanie and refused to take accountability for her actions while deflecting the entire blame to me. That was when Dad realized that there was no point in talking to her. She was beyond any level of sanity, and there was no redeeming what she did. He told her that he would be filing for divorce and asked her to move out. He apologized profusely, telling me that he could never forgive himself for what he allowed to take place. I told him that it wasn't entirely his fault, but that I needed some time to get over the entire ordeal and bring myself back to normalcy. The last few weeks had been very draining for me. I was actually looking forward to relaxing a little bit after my promotion, but this entire family drama just did not let that happen. Aunt Rosa and Uncle Mike called me and offered me support. They actually encouraged me to press charges, but at this point, I just want this mess to be over and live in peace. They have been very understanding of the situation, and that is all that I expected from anyone. In all honesty, I have no idea what Stephanie is doing and how she is managing, but she and Ann have had a falling out because Ann now blames her for the breakdown of her marriage. It's honestly a show, if you ask me, and I have asked everyone to leave me out of it. I have gone no contact with Dad as well for the time being, and even Aunt and Uncle know that they don't have to talk about the Ann and Dad situation with me. That's the biggest win that I could have asked for in this situation, and I am just glad that this is over. Hopefully, this will be my last update because I don't have it in me to tolerate even a single moment more of this. Thanks, and goodbye, for good.